The whole town of Cedar Ridge gathered to watch her shame. Men stood in a loose circle in the dusty square, boots planted wide, hats tipped low against the autumn sun. Some laughed. Some whispered. A few looked uneasy, but said nothing. And in the center of it all stood a tall woman with a grain sack pulled over her head, her hands bound like she was some wild animal dragged down from the mountains. Howard Briggs stood beside her on a rough wooden platform, grinning like he was selling cattle. "Strong as an ox," he called out. "Works from sunrise to dark. Might not be easy on the eyes, but she'll earn her keep." The laughter that followed was sharp and ugly. At the edge of town, Jed Halverson reined in his horse. He had not planned to stop. He had come down from the mountains for flour, salt, and coffee. Nothing more. At 42, Jed was a man who preferred silence over company and pine trees over people. 6 winters had passed since fever took his wife, and in that time, he had spoken more to the wind than to any living soul. But something about the way that woman stood beneath that sack made him pause. She was not slumped, not begging, not crying. Her shoulders were straight, her chin lifted beneath the rough cloth. Even bound and hooded, she carried herself like she refused to be broken. "One man's trash," Briggs said with a sneer, "is another man's bargain." Jed felt something cold twist inside him. "Why the sack?" someone shouted. Briggs shrugged. "Better this way. Trust me. You're not buying her for her pretty face." More laughter. The woman's hands tightened into fists. Jed saw the small tremble run through her arms. Not fear. Rage. $5, a man called half-heartedly. "3, another said. The bids were not serious. They were cruel. The woman swayed slightly, and Jed wondered how long she had been standing there like that, how long she had endured their stares. $10. The words left his mouth before he knew he had spoken. Silence fell over the square. Every head turned. Jed rarely spoke in town, rarely even looked at anyone. But now he sat tall in his saddle, eyes fixed on Briggs. $10 from Mr. Halverson, Briggs crowed quickly. "Do I hear 15? No one answered. "Sold!" Jed dismounted slowly. He climbed the platform, boots heavy on the boards. Up close, he could see how tall she truly was, nearly his height. The sack brushed against his shoulder in the breeze. "Papers," he said. Briggs handed them over eagerly. "She's yours. No returns." Jed ignored him. He turned to the woman. "Can you ride?" he asked quietly. A small nod. He cut the rope from her wrists. The skin beneath was raw. She did not thank him. She did not speak. But when he offered his hand to guide her down, she stepped on her own. That, more than anything, told him who she was. They rode out of Cedar Ridge under a sky turning orange with sunset. The town's laughter faded behind them. The mountain trail swallowed them whole. For a long while they said nothing. Then, beneath the sack, her voice came soft but steady. "Why?" Jed kept his eyes on the narrow path ahead. "Didn't seem right," he said. "Nobody deserves that." Silence again. Then, barely louder than the wind, "You don't know what you bought." "I didn't buy anything," he replied. "Just paid to get you away from that circus." The mountains grew darker as night fell. Wolves howled somewhere deep in the trees. She did not flinch. By the time they reached his cabin, the moon was high and silver. Jed lit a lamp inside. The small room filled with warm light. A bed in one corner, a table and 2 chairs, shelves of supplies. Simple, clean, lonely. She stood just inside the doorway. "The sack," she said quietly. Jed stepped behind her. "If you're willing." After a moment, she nodded. He untied the rough twine carefully and lifted the grain sack away. The lamplight touched her face, and Jed gasped. Not because she was ugly, not because she was frightening, but because she was unforgettable. One eye was deep brown, the other pale green. A long scar ran from her temple down her cheek, pale against her strong skin. Her auburn hair had been roughly cut, uneven around her jaw. Her features were sharp, bold, proud. She was not soft. She was not delicate. She looked like something carved from stone and fire, and she was watching him, waiting for disgust, waiting for rejection. Instead, Jed found himself staring at her like he had just seen the sunrise after a long winter. "The water's fresh," he said quietly. "Brought it up from the spring this morning." For a second, something flickered in her mismatched eyes. Surprise. Then she lifted the cup with trembling hands and drank. "My name is Mara," she said after a long moment. "Just Mara." "Jed Halverson." She studied him carefully. "What am I to you now?" Jed looked at the fire crackling in the hearth. "As far as I'm concerned," he said slowly, "you're a guest who needed help. And if I choose to leave, I'll take you wherever you want come morning." Her lips parted slightly. "You paid $10. Money's just money." Silence filled the cabin again, but this time it was not heavy. It was cautious, curious. When she finally allowed herself a small, uncertain smile, it changed everything. It softened the scar. It warmed her eyes. And in that quiet mountain cabin, far from the cruel laughter of Cedar Ridge, Jed Halverson felt something he had not felt in 6 long years. Hope. But neither of them knew yet that the storm riding toward them would test that hope in ways they could never imagine. The snow began falling 3 days after Mara came to the mountain. Not a soft snow. Not the kind that looks pretty on rooftops. This was heavy, steady, relentless snow that buried tracks and silenced the world. Inside the cabin, a different kind of silence settled between them. Not awkward, not empty. Careful. Mara woke before dawn each morning. Jed would hear the soft scrape of the stove door, the crackle of fire being coaxed back to life. She moved through the cabin like someone who had learned how to survive by staying unnoticed. But she was not weak. He saw it in the way she carried water buckets without complaint, in the way she split kindling when she thought he was not looking, in the way she studied the mountains through the window like she was measuring them. She was not afraid of the wilderness. That told him something. It was the 5th night when she finally spoke about the past. They sat by the fire. Jed was mending a trap. Mara was sewing a tear in one of his shirts. The lamplight glowed soft against her scar. "His name was Garrett Walsh," she said quietly. Jed did not look up. "The man who claimed me." Her needle moved steadily. "My father owed him money, gambling debts. When he couldn't pay, Walsh offered a solution." Jed's jaw tightened. "Me." The word hung in the air. "I was to serve 7 years in his house, cooking, cleaning, obeying." Her green eye darkened. "He wanted more than obedience." The fire popped sharply. "I refused to kneel when he demanded it. That scar," her fingers brushed her cheek, "came from his ring." Jed's hands went still. "I fought back," she continued, threw hot coffee in his face, ran. "And he caught you." "Yes." Her voice did not shake. "He spread lies. Said I was mad, dangerous, said my eyes were a curse. No one would hire me. No one would shelter me. She looked at Jed then. I became something people could point at. Jed finally spoke. You're not cursed. A small breath escaped her. I have a sister, she said. The words came heavier this time. Eliza. She's 17. When I ran, he kept her. Said it would make sure I never spoke out. The firelight reflected in her eyes now, both colors shining. He tells people she's simple-minded, that she needs him, but she's not. She's gentle. Too gentle. Jed felt something harden inside him. He's using her. Yes. The room grew very quiet. We'll get her out, Jed said. Mara blinked at him. You don't understand, she whispered. He has money, men, influence. Jed met her gaze steadily. I have a mountain. She almost laughed. That's not enough. It might be. She studied him for a long moment. Why would you risk this? Jed stared into the flames. I watched my wife die, he said quietly. Did nothing but hold her hand while fever took her. Sometimes, doing nothing is worse than fighting. Mara's expression softened. You barely know me. Know enough. Snow continued falling outside. For the first time, Mara reached across the table and touched his hand. Thank you, she said. The moment felt fragile, but it did not last. 2 days later, riders appeared through the storm. 3 men, a federal marshal and 2 deputies. Jed stepped outside before they reached the cabin. Jed Halverson, the marshal called. That's me. I'm Marshal Brennan. I'm here regarding a woman named Mara. Mara stepped onto the porch. I'm here by choice, she said firmly. The marshal removed a folded paper. Garrett Walsh claims breach of contract and theft. Jed's eyes darkened. Show me. The paper was legal, signed, witnessed, binding her to 7 years of service for her father's debt. It's slavery, Jed muttered. Legal debt bondage, the marshal corrected quietly. Territory law. Mara lifted her chin. I was beaten, starved, threatened. My sister is being held. The younger deputy looked uneasy. Marshal Brennan studied her face carefully. You willing to make that statement official? Yes. They went inside. The deputy took notes as Mara spoke calmly and clearly about everything Walsh had done. When she finished, silence filled the cabin. These are serious accusations, Brennan said. They're true. The marshal closed his notebook slowly. Officially, I came to retrieve a runaway debtor. Jed's grip tightened on his rifle. But, Brennan continued, I found a married woman living peacefully with her husband. Mara's breath caught. Married? Brennan met Jed's eyes. A married woman has protections. Walsh can't override easily. The implication was clear. After the lawmen left, snow swirling behind them, Mara sat at the table, hands trembling. He said married. Jed crouched beside her. It would protect you. She searched his face. Would you bind yourself to this? To my fight? Jed did not hesitate. If it keeps you safe. Tears filled her eyes. This isn't small. I know. She stood slowly. Then yes. Her voice was steady. Yes, Jed Halverson. I'll marry you. He felt something shift in his chest. Not obligation. Not pity. Something warmer. But before the ink could even dry on that decision, another rider arrived. Old Tom Buchanan from the upper ridge. Walsh hired regulators, Tom warned. 8, maybe 10. They're heading up here. The air inside the cabin went still. Mara's expression did not crumble. It sharpened. "He's coming," she said. Jed nodded once. "Then we'll be ready." Outside, the storm thickened. Inside, two people who had begun as strangers stood side by side. The mountain was about to be tested. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I'm really curious to know. The night Garrett Walsh came for her, the mountain held its breath. Snow covered the clearing in a pale blanket. The cabin stood quiet, lamp turned low, smoke barely rising from the chimney. Inside, Jed and Mara waited. They had moved the table on its side for cover. Rifles were loaded. Extra rounds laid out neatly. No panic. No wasted motion. Just readiness. Hoofbeats broke the silence first. Slow. Controlled. Confident. 8 riders emerged from the trees, dark shapes against the snow. They did not rush. These were not drunk cowboys. These were hired guns. A voice carried through the cold air. "Halverson, send out what belongs to Mr. Walsh, and no one gets hurt." Mara's jaw tightened. "I don't belong to him," she whispered. Jed glanced at her. "You don't belong to anyone." A torch flew through the air and landed on the roof. Flames tried to catch. They had soaked the boards earlier. The fire hissed and died. Gunshots exploded next. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Jed fired once through the window. A man cried out and fell. Mara moved fast, steady, fearless. She fired through the back door when boots pounded against it. Another scream. Another body in the snow. They came in waves, testing, probing. Then the front door burst open. 2 men rushed in. Jed shot the first. The second raised his gun. Mara fired before he could pull the trigger. The cabin filled with smoke and noise and shouting. Outside, Walsh's voice rose sharp and furious. "Burn them out!" More torches. More shots. Then something changed. Another sound rolled down from the ridge. Hoofbeats. Many of them. Tom Buchanan and half the mountain rode into the clearing like a storm breaking loose. Trappers. Miners. Hard men who knew injustice when they saw it. The hired guns hesitated. That hesitation cost them. Within minutes, the clearing turned into chaos. Walsh's men scattered. Some fled. Some dropped their weapons. And Walsh himself tried to run. Mara saw him first. "There!" she shouted. She grabbed a fallen rifle, lifted it steady to her shoulder, and fired. His horse went down hard. Walsh tumbled into the snow. They dragged him back to the cabin. He was no longer the powerful rancher. He looked small, afraid. "You think you've won?" He spat at Mara. She stepped closer, scar catching the firelight. "I already won the day I refused to kneel." Jed stood beside her, rifle calm in his hands. "You'll write it," Mara said firmly. "Freedom for Eliza. Release from every debt. Every claim." Walsh looked around at the mountain men surrounding him. He wrote, hand shaking, every word. When it was done, witnessed and sealed, Mara held the paper like it was life itself. "Tomorrow," Walsh muttered bitterly, "she'll be sent out." They put him on a stage heading east before dawn, under watch. The regulators disappeared like smoke, but Eliza did not arrive the next day, or the day after. That was when Mara knew. "He's locked the ranch down," she said. "His foreman won't let her go." Jed saddled the horses. "Then we go get her." They rode under moonlight. No backup, no noise, just 2 shadows moving through pine and snow. The double-bar ranch sprawled in the valley below. Lanterns burned in windows. Guards walked the yard. Mara led the way. She knew every fence, every door. They slipped inside through the kitchen with help from Rosa, the old servant who had once shown Mara kindness. "Eliza is upstairs," Rosa whispered. "Locked in the study." They climbed the servant's stairs. The door opened quietly. Eliza sat curled on a cot, thin and pale, but alive. "Mara?" Her voice cracked. Mara rushed to her. "I'm here, little bird. We're taking you home." Tears spilled freely. They almost made it. Almost. Curtis Bramwell stepped into the hallway, pistol raised. "End of the line," he sneered. Jed lifted his rifle, but Bramwell had the angle. "Drop it!" A gunshot cracked from behind them. Bramwell staggered. Rosa stood at the top of the stairs, smoking pistol in hand. 20 years I watched evil," she said quietly. "No more." They ran. Shouting erupted below. Shots followed them into the yard. Jed fired twice to keep heads down. They reached the horses, boosted Eliza up, rode hard into the trees. The chase lasted miles, but Jed knew the mountain. Streams, switchbacks, narrow passes. They lost them before dawn. When the cabin came into view, smoke rising warm and safe, Eliza finally broke down, sobbing into Mara's shoulder. "Are we free?" she whispered. "Yes," Mara said fiercely. They carried her inside, wrapped her in blankets, fed her warm broth. For the first time in years, Eliza slept without fear. Weeks passed. Snow melted. Spring crept into the mountains. The cabin grew louder. Laughter replaced silence. Eliza began humming while she cooked. Mara planted a garden beside the cabin. Jed built a second room with his own hands. The past did not vanish overnight, but it loosened its grip. One evening, as the sun dipped gold behind the peaks, Pastor William stood in their yard. This time, not for papers, for promises. Friends gathered. Tom Buchanan, Rosa and her family, even Marshall Brennan. Mara wore a simple blue dress, wildflowers woven through her hair. Her scar caught the light, but it no longer looked like something that marked her. It looked like something she survived. "Do you take this man?" the pastor asked. "I do," she said, voice strong. "And do you take this woman?" Jed looked at her like he had that first night in the cabin, not with shock, with gratitude. "I do," he answered. The cheer echoed across the valley. Later, as lanterns glowed and music filled the air, Jed stood beside his wife and watched Eliza laugh freely with the mountain folk. "No regrets?" Mara asked softly. "Not a one," she smiled. "That day in Cedar Ridge, I thought my life was ending." Jed brushed a thumb over the faint line of her scar. "Best $10 I ever spent." She laughed. Then he asked him beneath the wide Montana sky. The mountain man who bought a rejected bride with a sack on her head had not found shame. He had found strength. He had found family. And when he first lifted that sack and gasped at the sight of her face, he had not realized something simple and powerful. He had not rescued her. They had rescued each other.